This video gives you just a quick review of some of the things we learned about variables in week 1 that should be able to help you out on the retake for quiz 1. So just as a reminder, when we were talking about variables, we were talking about the things that we're measuring. So the thing that we want to capture that's going on in our sample, and then we want to compare variables to one another to understand their relationships. And so the thing that matters most about a variable is how we're going to measure it. And that has a lot to do with the way we analyze a variable in the data. So as a reminder, we've got two different ways of measuring something. So if we're measuring something with numbers, then we're calling it a continuous variable because there's a continuous range of numbers that we can use to measure that variable. But if we're using a set of words to measure something, then those words represent categories. And so we're measuring something with a particular set of categories, and then we'll analyze how many people fall into those categories instead of what are the values of the numbers that we measured. And particular variables could be measured either way. It just depends on how we're asking the question to the people that we're measuring. So imagine a variable for age. We could ask, how old are you in years, or what is your age in years? And people will reply with a number. They would tell you, I'm 12, I'm 50, I'm 75. And that would give us a numerical answer, which would be a continuous variable. We could also measure age with categories. We could ask people, what is your age group? Are you a minor, meaning that you're under 18 years old? Are you an adult between 18 and 64? Or are you a senior, age 65 and over? And so those are words that represent categories rather than numbers. And so the same variable age could be measured either continuously or categorically. And depending on how we ask that question or how we measure age, the data will look different. And so for the first question, asking for age in years, you can see the example of what the data will look like. You're going to have numerical responses for age. And then if we asked that second version of the question, then the age group is going to give us words that represent categories like adult, minor, or senior. And so when you're trying to remember what is categorical versus what is continuous, imagine how you're asking the question to measure that variable and whether that question will give you numbers or words. The other thing to remember about variables is the difference between what is a variable versus what are the levels of a variable. The levels are the different kinds of values that the variable will have. So for the example of asking about what is your age with different categories, age would be the whole variable. And the three levels would be, are you a minor, an adult, or a senior? So the levels are the different responses to the question that asks about age. From the Try It 1 data, we measured two different variables. One variable was residency type among UC Davis students. So that's one variable. It measures one kind of thing. Where did you live coming into UC Davis? The levels that people can respond with were California, other states, outside USA, or unknown. It wasn't measured. And so the levels were the 4 different categories that people could respond with, and there was a single variable where people could pick one of those 4 levels in responding to that single variable for residency type. The same thing is true for year. So we measured year as just what year were we measuring the enrollment for UC Davis students, and the levels of that variable were 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. And in this table, we've got 4 different rows for residency because there are 4 levels for one variable. We've got 4 different columns for year because there are 4 different levels to the variable year. So 2 variables, but each one has 4 levels to it. And that's the difference between levels and years.